All right, welcome back to the Double D Sports Show. That's right, Eric DeCam, Logan DeRungs with you here tonight. Going to talk some sports. Got some NFL, college football, big stories in college football. Two undefeated teams going down. We got some MLB stuff for you. Big trade, big move with the Miami Marlins. What they're doing down there in Miami. What we think of that situation. We'll have some NBA for you and maybe a little NCAA basketball at the end there. But once again, don't forget to check us out on Twitter, DBLD Sports Show. That's at DBLD Sports Show. Tweet us your comments after you check out the video, or just tweet us back on some of our posts that we put up there on certain games, and let's get some discussion going, and we'll address it in our shows and get some good back and forth going here between you, the viewers, and us, trying to put on a good show for you here. So that's our main goal. We want to put on a good show, and we want you guys to have fun watching us and have fun on Twitter. So we're going to get right into it here. We're going to recap Sunday night's game between the Baltimore Ravens and the Pittsburgh Steelers. Kind of an odd game last night on Sunday night. Pittsburgh's without Big Ben. Baltimore's coming in after a big offensive explosion the week before. Granted, it was against Oakland, but still, I mean, you put up that many points and that many yards, you're going to expect to do that week in and week out. And biggest thing for me was I was disappointed in Joe Flacco and their offense. I thought they'd do better, and I thought they'd be pumped up to come in and play against Pittsburgh, especially with Big Ben coming out or being out with his shoulder injury. But as we discussed before, Brian Leftwich came in and provided a spark for Pittsburgh to keep him in the game.
Byron Leftwich had I want to say a semi-decent game. He definitely didn't light the world on fire. He turned the ball over. He threw 21 incomplete passes, but he also did throw for 201 yards. He threw for over 200 yards, and he was sacked 3 times. The guy just did not play terrible. We saw him throw an interception. He also ran for a 31-yard touchdown run to Pittsburgh's second play of their first drive to actually put them ahead. And, we saw the defense of Pittsburgh, I think, played well. To come in on a team like you said that gave up that scored 55 points, the week before, to see Pittsburgh come in and just basically shut down that Ravens offense. Ray Rice 20 carries, 40 yards. Joe Flacco 20 of 32 for 164 yards, no touchdown, no sacks. It's a little bit of good efficiency, decent efficiency, 20 of 32, but just did not throw the ball down the field.
Right.
Just settled for the underneath routes, settled for the crossing routes, and didn't ever take a shot to Torrey Smith or to Anquan Bolden. And I think Dennis Pitta got hurt, the tight end for Baltimore, got hurt early in the game. That was a big reason. They had to play Ed Dixon the majority of the football game rather than just in a helping out role. But in the end, Pittsburgh had the ball, had a chance. This had the makings of another great Pittsburgh-Baltimore game. But just like in the interview after the game, he interviewed Terrell Suggs, and he says, it just wasn't the same without Big Ben. And I think that's a lot of it. Now, had Ray Lewis been playing, this Baltimore Ravens team would have been a lot more amped up, would have been a lot ready to go out and take to Pittsburgh like they would normally. Without Big Ben, there just wasn't the feeling we usually get in a Ravens-Steelers game. There was still the fighting, there was still the shoving, there was still the hatred, but it just wasn't the intensity you would have. If Big Ben takes that ball with 1:20 left in the game instead of Byron Leftwich, I think the Steelers can get in field goal range. It's just a difference in the outcome of the game. I think Pittsburgh probably ends up winning. Roethlisberger, I think, and I have no stats to back this up, but just my personal opinion of paying attention to the games, you know what? This guy has to have a pretty good record against Baltimore. I know last year they lost 2 games to him in the regular season, but they knocked him out in the playoffs. So that was 2 years ago.
Right.
But I definitely want to get maybe see how the Ravens play against the Steelers in 2 weeks, regardless of who's the Steelers quarterback. I just want to see how the Ravens respond, because to me, the Ravens can't feel very good about this win.
Right, I agree totally. It's a win, but I think they were expecting to do a lot better against Pittsburgh this time around.
Definitely. When you score 55 points one week, you're clicking on all cylinders. You're running the ball, you're throwing the ball, you're getting scores defensively and with your special teams. You got to remember, Baltimore's touchdown last night came off a punt return. Their offense generated 6 points. Okay, one of the field goals came off Leftwich's interception. 3 points not off turnovers or special teams. That does not cut it, Ravens. That's why you're not in my top 5 teams in the NFL.
Right.
That's why I don't feel like you're going to go to the Super Bowl. You know what? You can say you got the injuries, you got this, you got that. Everybody has injuries. Everybody has things that come up and haunt them. The players they have to go out and perform. They flat out don't do a consistency. We see one Ravens one week, we see the next. You know what? I don't care if you can score 55 against Oakland. If you can't beat a Roethlisberger-less Pittsburgh 13 better than 13-10,
Yep.
you are not a Super Bowl team, and that's my personal opinion.
Right. I agree to everything you said, and I think we got to credit Mike Tomlin for the way he prepared his Pittsburgh Steelers for this game and the way he handled Big Ben's injuries. I mean, if you watched any of the press conferences he had, I'm not worried about Big Ben. Obviously, he's a loss, but I care about my players who I have on the field and how they're going to perform and getting those guys ready. And I think he did a good job. It's unfortunate he had to come off with a loss, but you know he understands what situation he's put in. So credit Mike Tomlin for that.
Yep.
Let's move on to tonight's game. San Francisco hosting the Chicago Bears tonight. Big story in that game is Kaepernick versus Campbell, your 2 backup quarterbacks. Cutler and Smith are out with concussion injuries. We're not cleared to play. Probably a good thing because both of you guys took a pretty good hit a week ago, and they need to maybe sit out and clear the cobwebs a little bit. But what kind of game do you see it turning out to be? I think it's going to be an ugly game between Kaepernick and Campbell.
I absolutely agree. I think you're going to have 2 great defenses going at it, and the 2 great defenses are going to look to me as like 2 magnificent, terrific, historical defenses because of the playing of the backup quarterback. We saw last week Campbell coming against Houston and just was virtually ineffective. Granted, there was a lot of rain, the weather wasn't good. Tonight there's a high of 64, a low of 54 in San Francisco. 20% chance of precipitation, so it looks like a pretty good night for football.
Yep.
It's interesting to look at the line for this week. We see San Francisco as a 4-point favorite, and the over/under at 35. What do you think about that?
35 points total for the game.
35-point over.
I think they're going to be under 35.
I think
it's going to be a 13-10 game.
I have to agree. If you try telling me that these defense, as good as the defenses are, then not having their starting quarterbacks, Alex Smith, the fact that him not starting, this was like in the last 3 days. Okay, internally the San Francisco organization, they may have known the whole time, but for all we know, Colin Kaepernick's only known he's going to be started for a couple days maximum.
Right.
So I mean, how are they going to gel? How are they going to come together and play? I don't know. I'm taking the Bears. I think the Bears win this game even though it's on the road because I think the Bears defense is better than the 49ers. That's not to discredit the 49ers defense. I think Chicago's just a little bit better, and I trust Jason Campbell more than I trust Colin Kaepernick. And Jason Campbell has given me reasons not to trust him. So that's saying a lot. I just think he's going to go in there and make enough throws, pound the ball forte enough.
Yep.
The defense, to me, if the defense creates a turnover and scores, that's going to be a huge, huge dividend for those teams if, like I said, they can get a defensive score because the offense just flat out won't be there.
Right, and you just touched on it. That's the big thing tonight is the defense if they can put a score up, and we've seen Chicago do it all year long. Charles Tillman, the punch out. I mean, he's going to get a turnover, either an interception, and I think that's going to be the difference in the game. The other big thing is you touched on it earlier. Pounding the ball with forte. I think Bears run defense is a little bit better than the 49ers run defense, and they're going to be able to break down and wear down that front line of San Francisco, and they're going to have a better rushing game.
The thing is, I really am trying to hit home is that definitely these teams, especially these defenses, are going to be huge and crucial, and the run games are going to be huge because we're talking about backup quarterbacks. The Bears are great at getting pressure. The Bears are good at frustrated and disguising looks. Now they're doing it to Alex Smith. Alex Smith knows his weapons. He's confident in the offense. No, they're doing it to Colin Kaepernick, the backup quarterback.
Right.
There's a reason he's the backup. He's not as good. Obviously Jason Campbell isn't Jay Cutler either. But that's just what I'm trying to point out to me is that I think you take, to me, I'm picking the best defense and the best option at quarterback. And to me, Jason Campbell is a better option than Kaepernick. And that's why I take the Bears tonight. And I'm especially willing to bet on the Bears if I have a 4-point swing as well because I do not see how San Francisco covers that. There's just not enough there. The Niners aren't as good as everybody is making them out to be, in my opinion, and I think Chicago's going to prove that to us tonight. Yep,
I'm picking Chicago too tonight. It's going to be an ugly game. It might be kind of fun to watch. just on the defensive side. I think if you like a defensive game and a low-scoring game, and where it might
big
come down to a field goal.
If you like big hits,
Yep.
and if you like seeing guys get off blocks and make plays, you watch this football game because you're going to be very impressed. I don't. You said 13-10. You know what? I don't know that both teams will get a touchdown. I really would not be surprised to see a 9-6 or a 6-3 game, or maybe a 13-6 game. I really want it because it's going to be hard, especially once these guys get in the red zone, because these defenses bend and don't break all the time. I wouldn't be surprised to see a bunch of field goals. And then that game, I still give the edge to Chicago with their kicking game. So, you know what? It's going to be interesting. I'm excited to watch the game, so I guess we'll just have to see how it turns out.
Yep, I agree. It's going to be a fun game to watch. Well, let's go into our top 5. Let's give us our top 5 NFL teams for this week.
Okay.
I'm going to start off, and I had this team drop. I think I had them either 2 or 3 last week, and I got Houston at number 5 right now. The reason I dropped them to number 5, just not impressed with the way they played against Jacksonville. You're a 9-1 team, and you're playing a 1-6 team. You better be able to beat them more than 43-37, and
in
overtime. And for one thing, with your defense, you better not give up 37 points to Jacksonville. Now, credit Chad Henne. He came in and he played a great game. We saw a little bit of Chad Henne when I can't think of his name right now.
Oh, playing. Chad Henne played
in place of
Blaine Gabbert.
Blaine Gabbert.
This year.
Right, and he looked good.
He's actually been in the starting role for a few weeks now, just on and off. Gabbert's been really injured. It's kind of a bad thing there, but you're right. Henne has filled in and done what he can do. Chad Henne knows he's not even playing for a job; he's playing because he has an opportunity.
Right.
And he is making the most of it.
He is, and he did a good job on Sunday. He came out and he had a good day statistically. He had. As soon as I get his stats up here, he went 16-33. Not a good passing percentage, but 354 yards, 4 TDs, no interceptions. That was the key. No interceptions and 4 TDs. You can do that against the Houston Texans defense. You're having a good game. Now, I'm going to take a little bit away from that just because I think the Houston Texans defense is better than that. I thought they should have stepped up and played a lot better.
Right.
But they found a way to win. But that's why I dropped them to number 5.
I guess I haven't dropped Houston that far, but I will go to my number 5 team. I got New England still at number 5. You know what? I could see this happening. I sat there and watched. I was waiting for the Broncos game to come on TV. They were showing the end of the Cowboys-Browns game, so I flipped it over and watched the Patriots and Colts start. And I was so impressed the way Andrew Luck drove that team down the field. You know what? We were sitting here watching this, or talking about. We sat here and talked about the New England Patriots. The Indianapolis Colts last week about how they're going to make the playoffs if they can do it. And we thought this game against New England would be a big test. No, I don't exactly know if this is a huge test. I think New England proved that they are the team to beat. They are absolutely, the team that they have to go through. Indy still is New England. If you want to win the AFC, you have to beat the Patriots.
Yep.
Someone has to take them out. And I don't think it's going to be Indianapolis. I think they really the New England Patriots really put a show down to show, hey, 59-24, we are that good. You're not that good yet. Andrew Luck, like I said, a great game. He threw 3 picks, but he did get 2 touchdown passes and 334 yards. But to talk about the Patriots, it reinstated my confidence in them. I keep them at number 5. They don't move up in the rankings, but they don't fall out. I think that Luck looked good against the Patriots defense. It's going to be kind of strugglesome for these guys to continue to stop the really good quarterbacks. But can any defense stop the New England Patriots? They still have the best offense to me in the game. Losing Gronkowski, he'll be back.
Yep.
They're going to get Hernandez back.
Yep.
You know what? These Patriots can really move the ball. They can run it now. Look out, New England. They're going to be there. Someone's going to have to take them out. We saw last year. No one beat them, and they won the AFC. They're the defending champs any way you look at it.
Right, yep. Well, and you touched on it. Rob Gronkowski had a big game, 7 receptions, 137 yards, 2 TDs.
And got hurt.
I
think if he would have stayed in.
And he got hurt on an extra point play, blocking on an extra point. So when he comes back, they'll be back in form. I have Patriots a little bit higher, so I'm going to touch on them coming up when we get up there. Number 4, I had the Falcons at number 4. I think I had them number 1 as of last week too. And the same reason I dropped drop the Houston Texans. Falcons get a close win against the Arizona Cardinals, against their third string quarterback. Played a lot in that game, and like I said, I didn't get to watch a lot of games, so I caught a lot of highlights. But the Falcons, same principle. You're a 9-1 team. You're leading the NFC South, probably one of the better divisions in the NFC. You got to be able to put teams away like the Arizona Cardinals and beat them better than 23-19. Matt Ryan had a terrible game. He had 301 yards, but he had 5 interceptions. That's not the Matt Ryan that's going to win you a Super Bowl. And they got to continue to show their dominance. They can't let up, because in the NFC South, you got the Saints sneaking up on you. And if you give the Saints any bit of daylight, they're going to take advantage of it. And the Falcons just got to keep their foot on the gas, is what I think. And that's why I dropped them to number 4.
I had Atlanta number 3, and I'll touch on that real quick in a minute. But I put Chicago at number 4. Chicago, that's with Jay Cutler. If Jay Cutler's injury turns out to keep him out multiple weeks, they almost get a kind of a pass this week playing Colin Kaepernick's Niners rather than Alex Smith's Niners. And if they can get a win and then get Cutler back, or even if they lose a game and then get Cutler back, they'll still be in good shape. If Cutler misses 4 or 5 weeks, the Bears might fall completely out of the playoff picture.
Right.
So that's with Jay Cutler, and that's ultimately because he has the ability to score the ball. Their defense is going to play great. The Bears' defense has kept them where they are. But love him or hate him, Jay Cutler makes this team. They go with this. They go only as far as Jay Cutler takes them. It's how it goes with most quarterbacks, but with the Bears especially, because look at the options you have behind him. Jason Campbell and Caleb Haney. These guys are not going to take them anywhere in the playoffs. We saw that last year when Cutler got hurt.
Right, I agree, and I just want to throw this in there quick. I dropped the Bears out of my top 5 just for that reason of Cutler being hurt.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know how long he's going to be out. That concussion could be season-ending. So
absolutely.
I just wanted to throw that in there quick.
Number 3, I had Atlanta. They slide week by week for me. I had them number 1 2 weeks ago, 2 last week, and now I got them at 3. They beat Arizona, but they did so in comeback fashion at home. Matt Ryan, I believe he's 34-4 or 31-4. I saw a stat in his record at home. This guy plays well at home.
Right.
He wins at home. 5 interception isn't playing well. But we saw him throw the ball 46 times. They have to get the running game going. 58 yards. They ran the ball to me enough 24 times. I believe Michael Turner had 15 carries again for about 40-some yards, and then kind of a committee got the other 14 yards.
Yep.
But Atlanta needs to establish the running game. You have to take the pressure off Matt Ryan. And also, like I said, 46 yards last week, 58 this week. That's not good enough. Because when you're playing teams like the Saints, when you're playing teams that like to throw the ball around, you don't want to give them the ball back. And by having Matt Ryan throw the ball 46, 48, 50 times a game, you're limiting the clock, your time of possession, and giving some back to the other team. You run the ball a little bit more, get the running game going, make it work. Don't accept not being able to run the ball. You can maybe take a drive or 2 away from those teams and essentially take a touchdown or 2 away from those teams.
Right, yep. And just on the opposite side of that, against the Atlanta Falcons, the Arizona Cardinals this last week, they get to Stephen Towling, they gave up 127 yards rushing.
Yep.
So, Arizona was winning that battle and keeping Matt Ryan off the field, and they had to play catch up. So that's why they were throwing those 46 times. But you're absolutely right.
Well, the thing is, though, they played catch up, but you just look at the box score, you just look at the scoring. Arizona, Atlanta at halftime, the tie game at 16 at halftime. Third quarter scoreless. Arizona 3, Atlanta 7 in the fourth.
Right.
They were never in a point where they had to throw the ball. They were never they were never down by 2 scores, 3 scores. They did not have to throw the ball 46 times. They ran it 24. I'd like to see them run it 30 and throw the ball 6 less times.
Right.
Even it out a little bit more. But the thing is, they couldn't run it because they weren't able to. They could not run the ball in Arizona. But that's no excuse. And it's never an excuse that, we can't run the ball. Figure out a way to do it, because it's going to come back to hurt them. Maybe now they play Arizona, but when they play New Orleans in a couple weeks, they will lose to the Saints again if they can't run the ball.
Well, and they were down 13-0 at the end of the first, and when, like you said, when you can't run the ball the way you want to, and you're down 13 points, and you're thinking, we got to put some points up.
Right, but the thing is, my main point is, it's 13 points in the start of the second quarter. You're not starting the fourth quarter.
Right. I agree.
You're not at a point where you have 2 drives and need 13 points. you're at a point where you got 3 quarters, 45 minutes of football. They have to stay patient and run the football, and they did. The Cardinals didn't let them get the yards.
Right.
24 rushes in a game is not. It's not like last week. I think they ran it like 17 or 18 times. 24 is a little bit more. But why did Michael Turner? He's only got 15 carries. You're paying this guy a lot of money. Give him the ball. Make it work. Tell these offensive linemen, hey, you know what? The run game isn't working. Make it work. You guys don't get to just sit back and pass block the whole game.
Right.
They have to control the clock. We saw it last week. They lose, and this week, if the New Orleans, the Atlanta Falcons are any better, we said the wrong team again. Arizona. If Arizona's any better of a team, if they're the team we saw the first 4 weeks of the year, they win this game. Atlanta won the time of possession battle by 5 minutes. They could have won it by 15 by just running the ball 10, 12 more times. But once again, the yards weren't there, so I guess that's why they had to do it.
Right. And I had the Patriots at number 3. I thought, them coming out and playing as well as they did against the Indianapolis Colts really kind of gave me confidence in how good they are in that top 5. Number 3, I think they've been in my top 5 the last 2 weeks we've been doing this, but I think I moved them up a couple spots just because of
their.
their.
Put them in it last week. The first week, I don't think they were that right. The first team outside looking in.
Okay, yep, that's right. But a 59-24 win against a 6-4 team like the Colts. The Colts are 6-4 and they've won games people didn't expect them to win, but you still expected the Patriots to come out and win a game in this fashion against the Colts, and that's why I bumped them up ahead of the Falcons. And
you know what?
The eye test is the big thing. We talk about that all the time. The eye test. I just think the eye test with Brady and Belichick, and once Gronkowski comes back and Welker and all the offense they have, they're better than I think.
I didn't expect the Patriots to win the game 59-24. But I did expect them to win the game handily. I mean, they're 59-24. The Colts pretty much got it taken to them.
Yeah.
And if they put 24 points on the board, I'm honestly really thinking that the Colts have a legitimate chance to win the game. I was expecting like a 31-10. Okay. 59-24 is not what I thought. I thought the Colts defense could control them a little bit more. You know what? It just showed that the Colts are a couple years off from being cream of the crop. They're a team that can make the playoffs. They might steal a game, but they're not going to go to the Super Bowl. It just isn't going to happen. I would never, not to take anything away from Indy. They're a great team. They played really well, but they're just not there. I mean, this is a team that was 2-14 last year. I mean, we're talking about a team that has completely reversed it, and it's great, but it's going to take a couple more years.
Right. Well, and they won 59-24. Getting back to that, and Tom Brady really didn't have an outstanding, Statistically, he only had 331 yards and 3 TDs. But the biggest thing is New England had 3 defensive touchdowns. Akeem Talib had a defensive touchdown, and
I touched on that last week. I said
Edelman had a touchdown, and then there was one over Denard. Denard had a defensive touchdown.
Getting Akeem Talib from Tampa Bay was a big find for the Patriots.
It was. It really was.
This guy's a really good player, and I said that. I remember saying that last week. I knew he'd make an impact, and he did it right away. Getting a defensive score. But just to go back to what you said, not an amazing game. 331 yards, 3 touchdowns, and no picks. That's a quarterback stat that you want your team to have, and New England has that guy that can do it every single week. Yep. That's why we got them ranked so high. They're number 5 and number 3 in our top 5. Yep. Who'd you have at 2?
Number 2, I had Green Bay. I put Green Bay at number 2 just because I think they're going to start taking control of that NFC North now. It's the eye test again. You can never count Aaron Rodgers out. Mm-hmm. And once they get Greg Jennings back, it's going to be a lot easier for Aaron Rodgers.
The Greg Jennings story, I can't pick Green Bay to win because I'm counting on Greg Jennings. Not confident that he's going to come back, but even without him, they are still just unbelievable. The way they just win games. They're very quietly, I believe they started 3-3. They've won 4 in a row. Now they're back up to 7-3.
Yep.
They're kind of like a team we got coming up here pretty soon. Out in Colorado that have just very quietly creeped up, and now people are finally realizing it. We're looking at 7 weeks away from the playoffs. We're looking at, hey, we're going to start looking at teams that we think can make a run. Green Bay's right there. I got them right outside looking in. I want to see them win. We saw them beat Detroit. We saw them.
Well, they beat a Detroit team who was probably really hungry for a win.
Yeah, you
know,
have
they
to think
lose to
Detroit.
Minnesota the week before. They're looking
Yep.
to come out and reestablish themselves in that NFC North, and they didn't do it.
And Detroit had perfect position to win the game.
Yeah.
They had the lead in the fourth quarter. They ended up blowing the lead. You know, that happens with Detroit. It's been kind of their thing throughout this year.
Yep.
But Green Bay has very quietly snuck up, and if the Bears drop tonight to the Niners, they are tied, and Green Bay has the tiebreak. Green Bay is back in first place. Who would have thought that? With the way the season started,
Right.
you know, in Week 12, Green
Right.
Bay will be going in with the lead. But you know, we see them rip off 5 wins in a row, and 1 win against Houston in dominant fashion against a team that we feel is
Right.
one of the top teams in the league.
Yeah, and Green Bay's got 2 games against Minnesota yet. I'm personally hoping Minnesota splits with them, but I don't see it. So there's 2 more wins for them, and I think they're sitting in a pretty good spot in that NFC North.
I got number 2 on my top 5 for the week. I got Houston. I dropped them from 1 to 2. Not necessarily because they're playing so bad, but because my number 1 team is absolutely on fire. It's the hottest team in the NFL. You talk about the Packers, but my number 1 team is the hottest team in the NFL. So the reason I have Houston there is partially due to that reason. It's also due to, they were nearly upset by Jacksonville at home. They continue to put up huge offensive numbers, 43-37 in overtime. But this is about the only game recently, other than the Packers game, which, as we talk about, was 5-6 weeks ago. So this really is the only game where Houston's defense really let them down. We saw them have a good outing against Chicago. We saw them give up 9 points against Buffalo. 40-13 win over Baltimore. Houston's defense has been, statistically one of the best in the NFL. Like I said, we definitely take a step backwards against Jacksonville, so you have to drop them in the rankings.
Right.
It's just how it works. It's a
Yeah.
week-to-week league. We say it every week.
Yeah.
But that's why I have Houston at number 2. I know they beat the number 1 team on my power rankings, but you know what? It changes week to week, and that was a long time ago. And we both agree, I think, on our top team this year right now, and we both have Denver. Why do you have Denver?
Well, as you said, they're the hottest team, and because of Peyton Manning. I mean, this guy is going to lead them to hopefully the glory land. Because I'd love to see Peyton Manning coming off the neck surgery he did, just have a great year and contend for a championship. They beat a good San Diego team. I mean, not a great San Diego team, but a San Diego team that was kind of in the same position as the Detroit Lions. They were looking for a win. They needed a win to get their confidence back up there. And it's just, they weren't going to do it against the Broncos. And I think Peyton Manning had that mindset no matter what. Yeah, first quarter he came out and threw the interception to Eric Weddle, who returned it for a touchdown. And then from there it was Peyton Manning. Like he developed 3 drives, 2 for touchdowns, 1 for a field goal, and just that's what Peyton Manning does. He fixes the mistake he has, and he goes back out there and he forgets. He's probably the best quarterback I've seen in my lifetime that could just have complete amnesia from the last series before.
Right.
You'd have never guessed that he threw a pick 6 the first quarter, and then come out and have 3 straight drives in the second quarter for scoring.
I think Peyton Manning definitely is a big reason. He's number 3 in touchdowns with 24. We look at quarterback rating, he's number 2, and also in completion percentage, he's also number 2 at 68.5%. That's unbelievable. Because I want you to listen to this stat and just really absorb these numbers in your head. Because this really is surreal. Okay, Alex Smith has thrown 70% completion rate, 152 out of 217. Peyton Manning 68.5%, nearly the same percentage. Thrown 372 passes, 150 more passes. All right, to maintain that percentage for that many passes is unbelievable. Now Matt Ryan and Tony Romo right behind Peyton, Aaron Rodgers right behind Peyton, throwing similar number of balls, but they're still below it. I look at that and I think Peyton Manning's 68.5 is a lot more impressive than Alex Smith's 70.
Yeah.
Had Alex Smith been 78, then we're talking something
Right.
spectacular. But there's just a difference there. So I think Peyton Manning's a reason. Broncos have 2 guys on their team that are going to make a run for offensive and defensive player of the year. Von Miller this year has 13 sacks. He's going to be a candidate for defensive player of the year, along with J.J. Watt in Houston, and Peyton, along with guys like Tom Brady and those 2 quarterbacks will probably be considered for offensive player of the year in the AFC. So, you know what? These Broncos have good players on both sides of the ball. They got DJ Williams back on defense this week. He made some plays. The defense statistically has improved each week against Jack Del Rio. They have, like I said, 35 sacks. Von Miller actually has 13 of those.
Yep.
And we talk about their offense. It's one of the highest, scoring-wise. It has to be up there in the NFL. I don't know. Like I said, I don't know an exact stat. Maybe you can find that quick. But just to point out that the Broncos in the last 8 games have scored over 30 points. And they have scored over 30 points in 9 of 10 games this year. If they can continue to do that, the way their defense is improving, they're going to be a hard out in the postseason. You put up 34 points against New England, yeah, New England has the ability to score over that. But the way Denver's defense is playing, we got to remember, they've won, 5 games in a row. And they've had a bye week in there. So this New England game was 6 weeks ago. 8 weeks ago against Houston, 9 weeks ago against Atlanta. Peyton Manning went to school with these Denver receivers, the Denver offense. Jack Del Rio going to school with the Denver defense. They've done this for 9 weeks, and actually 6 weeks since their last defeat. They can keep rattling off wins against lesser opponents, not just winning but getting better. Look out for Denver in the postseason.
Absolutely, I agree. And the one thing I wanted to touch on, a little bit of a debate here. Me being a Minnesota fan, you being a Denver Broncos fan, you talk about comeback player of the year.
Yep.
Peyton Manning with his neck surgery, Adrian Peterson with his knee surgery and horrific knee injury he had at the end of last year. Who do you think's had a more comeback of a season? I think I know where you're leaning, and I lean a little bit to that way too. But I just want to hear a little bit.
Yeah,
on
that's
that.
a good point. I'm glad you brought that up. You know what? I don't discount what Adrian Peterson did at all. One question I do have: these awards, not quite 100% familiar with them. Is there an NFC and an AFC, or is it overall?
It's just overall, I believe.
The comeback is overall.
Comeback.
But the offensive player of the year and defensive, don't they give one out for each conference?
Yes.
Overall MVP is overall, but offensive
Right.
defensive, okay.
Right.
All right, so we're there. Because we talked about Adrian Peterson. He's put himself in position in the MVP race. He has to have. He's leading the league in rushing by 128 yards over the next guy. He's he hasn't quite gotten the end zone as much as he probably would have liked. Only 7 touchdowns. We see like Doug Martin has 10, Arian Foster, these other guys. Arian Foster has 10, Doug Martin with 7, another guy, Ray Rice, with 7. So, but AP has definitely the yards, and just to coming off the injury has put him in the case for MVP. Don't think he won it because of the big, huge numbers Manning, Rodgers, Breeze are putting up.
Right.
Don't think he wins comeback player of the year simply because, you know what, he missed 2 games. Now, he had horrific knee surgery.
Right.
You say that.
Right.
But the fact is, he did make a comeback. It might be a bigger comeback, but the fact that Peyton Manning's age is going to come in there and what he's doing with that team. The Broncos made it to the Final Four, if you will, in the AFC last year. But they definitely, they had an 8-8 record in the year. They're on pace now. I think would not be surprised if they went 13-3 or 12-4. And that just changing that team, coming back out that neck surgery. Don't get me wrong. If the Minnesota Vikings make the playoffs and maybe even win a game in the playoffs, Adrian Peterson is right there, and it's going to be a close race for that award. But I think in the end it goes to Manning. You know what? The quarterback takes the credit for the wins, but he also takes the credit for the losses. And that's why I think ultimately it'll go to me.
Right. I agree with you in the sense that just the one thing I want to touch on why I think Manning would get the edge on the comeback player of the year is because, like you said, Peterson only missed a game and a half or 2 games essentially, and Peyton Manning had a whole year off. And neck surgery, when you're playing football, your neck's pretty important. So is your knee.
That's not to discount Peterson.
No,
we have to point out.
Right.
We have to point out that Peterson, if it's coming back from an injury, at the rate Adrian Peterson did, the speed he did, unbelievable.
Right.
Never done before.
Right.
But,
and just the way he looks playing the game, you would have never thought he had a knee injury last year.
But Peyton Manning has completely revamped this offense.
Right.
They have turned this team in from a pound the football and score 20 points and smack you in the mouth on defense to get out there, sling the ball around, put 30 on the board, and smack you in the mouth on defense. He has improved this offense. I was sad to see Tebow go. Didn't know how this whole Manning experience was going to work, but I'm very glad it happened because he's going to give them a chance to win a Super Bowl the next 3, 4, 5, 6, basically however long he plays, seasons.
Right, and I just wanted to touch on that a little bit on Peyton Manning probably has a little bit bigger of an impact on his team than Peterson does.
Exactly.
But I think even if you take Peterson out of the Minnesota Vikings, they only have 1 or 2 wins this season.
Definitely, you're definitely looking at that, but that's because your running back in Minnesota is better than your quarterback.
Right.
And I say
Right.
that no discount to Ponder, not a big Ponder
Well,
fan.
he's a second-year player.
But
I mean,
but we are looking at Adrian Peterson as the best tailback in the league on your team. Peyton
Right.
Manning, one of the best quarterbacks on your team.
Right.
And like I said, if Peyton Manning went out and was a big bust this year, he would win Bust of the Year.
Right.
So to me, to go out and be a big success, it has to be who comeback player of the year.
yep, I agree. Well, you said it earlier about Denver running the table and maybe 13-3, 12-4. So let's get a little bit into that. Let's talk about our playoff picture as we stand.
Starting AFC, or we're going to go to the NFC first?
We'll start with the AFC. Let's start with the
AFC.
AFC.
Okay.
And
We sit right now. I got it right here. We're looking at Houston at 9-1, Baltimore at 8-2, New England at 7-3, and Denver at 7-3. Those are all in that order, 1 through 4, due to some tiebreakers between Denver and New England as the head-to-head win percentage. Sorry, not win over the team, the win percentage on head-to-head.
Right.
And then we got Indy and Pittsburgh at 6-4, and there's another tiebreaker there. Obviously, there's a lot of games we played. We got 6 games left. A lot can be told. But if you look at this, you know what? I'm going to see it very hard for much shuffling to go around. If you look down a little bit farther, like I said, 6 games left. Cincinnati at 5-5 to me is the only team that I feel has a chance to sneak in from the outside, and I think that's if they can push out the Colts. Okay, because Pittsburgh, it's Pittsburgh. They're the Steelers. You know what? One of these years they may miss the playoffs, but I will never, ever, ever write them off.
No.
Just because that's who they are. We saw them almost win a game at home against Baltimore without Big Ben. If they can get Big Ben back, they're going to win enough games to make the postseason. Cincinnati has a tough schedule to me. They got to play, at San Diego. San Diego's going to be battling for a playoff spot, so something has to give there. One of them teams could essentially knock each other out of the race.
Yep.
And then also, they have to go at home against Dallas, who's in the thick of things and playing a little bit better, at least winning. And they have to go to Pittsburgh and host Baltimore. So in the end, I don't see Cincinnati making that rush. I think we talked about Indianapolis schedules a lot, and we both pretty much agreed that they could go 10-6 and get a 5th or 6th seed and make the playoffs. Because we talked about they got Buffalo, Detroit, Tennessee, Kansas City, 4 pretty winnable games, and Houston twice. And the way Houston's kind of reeling backwards, we think that they can pull off a win there. I think maybe the shuffling of the position of the seeding will go around. I think in the end you're going to see Houston, Denver, Baltimore, New England and Baltimore, because I think Baltimore, this playing not so hot, is going to come back to bite them one of these times. New England and Denver are both hot. I think they're going to jump over that, and I think then you're going to have Pittsburgh leaping over Indy for 5-6. But the teams are going to stay the same. I just think the seeding shuffles.
Yep, and I'm going to have to concur with you on that one. Same type of thing. I think New England and Denver jump over Baltimore. Mm-hmm. And with Houston's got a tough schedule to finish out their season.
Right, we're talking about playing Indy twice.
Right.
Indy twice is enough to say that that's a tough.
Yeah, and Denver could easily jump from 4-1, and New England from 3-1 or 3-2. But I think the most impressive thing is Indy being in the playoff picture.
Yep, absolutely.
That's huge.
You look at, I think it's a combination of the AFC being weak and Indy playing well. They're obviously playing better. They're playing for a cause.
Right.
But the AFC typically is not as strong as they were in previous years. We talk about teams. If you look down a little bit farther, San Diego, Tennessee, the Jets, the Bills, and the Dolphins at 4-6. These guys are just flat out going to have to go 500. Go over 500, either win out or go 5-1 to be 9-7. You're not going to get in the playoffs at 8-8. It's just not going to happen, because I think Indy and Pittsburgh can both win 3 more games.
Right.
And if they go 9-7, that's what you have to be. We talked before about 10-6 making the playoffs. As cruddy as the bottom half of the AFC looks, 9-7 might do it. So Indy and Pittsburgh, I have no doubt in my mind. I think they're going to get in there.
Well, yeah, and you touched on it with the AFC being down a little bit. I don't think anybody expected San Diego or the Jets to be 4-6 at this point in the season. There were high hopes for the Jets, and there's always high hopes for San Diego for some reason with North Turner and Phillip Rivers. So, Pittsburgh has definitely taken advantage when they needed to and put them in a good
It doesn't happen very often. They talked about it during the Broncos-Chargers game. first time I believe since 2007 that the Broncos have beaten the Chargers twice in 1 year.
Oh,
It might
wow.
even have been longer than that. It might have been 7 years. 7 sticks in my head for some reason.
Okay.
But yeah, 4-6. They're really struggling. They turn the football over too much. They're just not the team that we thought they were going to be. And I was confident Denver would win that division. I just didn't think that I thought San Diego would put more of a fight. I thought Kansas City would too, and look how that turned out. And Oakland as well. I thought this had potential of being one of the best divisions in the AFC. Turns out
Right.
to be the worst division in football, not just the AFC,
Right.
in my opinion.
Right.
So, and then you talked about the Jets. Always high expectations with Rex Ryan in New York, but they just flat out are not playing very well, and it doesn't look good in New York. So, but. Well, we agree that there'll be some shuffling around, but we think the 6 teams that are in are the teams that are there to stay. So
Yep.
I'll let you have your first say on the NFC.
NFC, we got Atlanta sitting at number 1 with 9-1 record. Chicago, 2 seed, 7-2. San Francisco, 3, 6-2. And that could shuffle around depending on tonight's game. New York Giants are in at 6-4. Green Bay is in at 7-3, and Seattle's in on the inside at 6-4. And that's probably they got their tiebreaker over Tampa. Same thing there based on win percentage in conference games. And I think they're probably going to take that NFC West division with well, maybe not. I guess that they got the Niners in there, so
They're a wild card right now.
Right.
I think you know what? There are teams outside looking in that I feel like have a legitimate opportunity because I'm not confident in Seattle. You know what? Green Bay. You see Green Bay right now at the 5.
right.
To me, they're going to be 2 or possibly 1 because Green Bay is going to roll off some wins. I think they're going to win the division over Chicago. Chicago has their work cut out for them to make the playoffs. We're talking about a team that is possibly the second best record in the league right now.
Right.
That might not even make the playoffs.
Right.
Just depending on their quarterback health.
Right.
Even with a healthy Cutler, I'm not guaranteeing the fact that they win the division. Now making the playoffs is different because if they win tonight and they go 8-2 in the final 6 games, they can go 4-2 with Cutler, no problem.
Right.
And then they're in. But we look at Seattle, not sold on Seattle. You know what? I'm not sold on Tampa Bay, Minnesota either. I think that these teams are teams that can continue to win and possibly make a push. But you got 2 pretty hot 5-5 teams. I guess I don't know if you call Dallas hot. They won 2 games over Philly and Cleveland, 2 of the
Right.
most strugglesome teams in the league.
Right.
But they talked about it on the game. Cleveland is not that bad of a football team. Now their record doesn't show it. They're 2-8, but they're a little bit better of a 2-8 than most teams usually are. So I like that win for Dallas. And do I think Dallas makes the playoffs? No. But do I give the Saints an outside shot? Absolutely. I think the Saints could probably sneak in there over Seattle. You know what? If I had to make a prediction, that's honestly the direction I'm going in. Just because we talk about the Saints' schedule. If you look at their schedule, they got a big win over Oakland. They just rolled off. They got 3 in a row, and 5 of their last 6. And we're talking about the only loss was to a team that we both say is the best in the NFL right now, in the Denver Broncos. So they got San Francisco, they got Atlanta, they got New York. That's 3 very tough games. The next 3 weeks are going to really tell the difference to me for
Right.
the Saints, because then they close with Tampa, Dallas, and Carolina. If they can go 2-1 in the next 3 and then win out the final 3, I mean, you're looking at a 10-6 team that can make the playoffs. Do I think it'll happen? I guess if I had to make a pick, I'm picking the team that's in there right now. I'm picking the Seahawks. But again, I haven't researched the schedule, so it's hard to make a
Seattle-
decision.
Seattle has a game next week against Miami. That's very winnable. Chicago, depending on if Cutler comes back. If Cutler's
Right.
not back, I think Seattle takes that game.
Yep.
Arizona, I think they take that game. I think they take
Buffalo,
a game against Buffalo. San Francisco, same thing. Alex
you don't
Smith
know.
might be
you
back.
don't know. And then they got the Rams.
But I'm just saying they got 6 games left.
Right.
I think they can very easily go 5-1 in their next
Right.
6
I
games.
mean, that's the thing. We're talking about it now. It can all change, and we can make a prediction. It could be dead on.
Russell
it could
Wilson
be
could
dead
be the
wrong.
next quarterback to go down with the season-ending injury,
Yep.
and then there goes Seattle's season.
Yep. I'm a little more confident to me in Matt Flynn than Jason Campbell or Colin Kaepernick, but I see where you're going with that.
Right.
The thing about, to me, the Vikings, you got 2 games with Chicago, 2 games with Green Bay.
Yep.
You got Houston. All right, that's 5, like we said.
Tough games.
If Cutler's back, that's 5 very, very, very tough games.
Right.
And you're at Houston.
At Houston.
Okay.
And you got at Green Bay.
At St. Louis in there, maybe that's a win. But I mean, if you think that you're probably if you're the Vikings that in that stretch of 6 games, you're happy to go 3-3.
Yep.
Well, 9-7 is not going to qualify you for
Right.
the postseason. So it's a very daunting task for the Vikings. I think the Vikings just have to think about 8-8 or 9-7, and consider that a win in itself. Consider that their Super Bowl, because to go from where they were last year to 8-8 or 9-7, that's a huge step in the right direction.
It is.
They are moving in the right direction.
Yep.
But we talk about the Vikings a lot just because of the location and the geographic location to us. They're irrelevant to us. I just think that they're not quite a playoff team this year.
No.
But
they got a chance. They got a chance to be. They do got a chance. They're going to have to win some tough games. They're going to have to beat Chicago. They're going to have to beat Green Bay. And they're going to have to beat Houston.
10 games through the year, you're absolutely right. They're in position that they have a chance. But you know what? I think a chance is about all they got, because playing. Maybe they get a break and Cutler's not back in 2 weeks or not back in 4 weeks as well. But with Jay Cutler, I don't see him beating the Bears, and I can't see him beating the Packers, not even once. I just can't pick the Vikings just because of the Packers' offense. And then you look at, who was the other one? Oh, Houston. And
St. Louis.
And I think they beat St. Louis, but the Houston game is no gimme. So I think we talk about the last team on the outside looking in was Tampa Bay. They got Atlanta, Denver, New Orleans. Atlanta twice. I don't think Tampa Bay's got it and will make a run. I think if New Orleans can make a run and win some games, they can get it. Otherwise, to me, Seattle hangs on. And I'm not even talking about Dallas, because I can't talk about the Cowboys. I just don't. That's
a topic for a whole other show.
Yeah, you could do a whole show on the Cowboys. I just don't think that they have it in them to run the table. So.
Right. Well, we're pretty even keel on our NFL.
Quick question for you though. Preseason NFL Super Bowl pick. Did you ever consider that? Did you ever have a team that you thought would win the Super Bowl, and if so, over what team? Preseason,
I probably had New England back in there. I got to think back to the preseason.
I mean, you talk about the Giants were
a favorite.
Yeah. You have a rematch.
Philly was a favorite. A lot of people picking Philly to come out and be strong.
I just bring that up because, you know what? I'll stick with what I said preseason. Preseason, I thought that the Giants would be dominant, and I thought that they would make the playoffs in dominant fashion and go to the Super Bowl. Now we look at them; they're back in the playoffs as a wild card, like they always are.
Right.
They're a division leader, but they're a wild card weekend player.
Right.
So like a 4 seed, and
right.
That's where they always are. And they always seem to make the Super Bowl and win. So I still think they're going, and I picked Denver to beat them in a managed Super Bowl. Standing by that, I think Broncos Giants still. And the reason I asked you your preseason, I wondered if you wanted to change it.
Well, no, I think preseason, I had pretty high hopes for San Francisco 49ers too, and that's all.
Patriots?
Yep, I think I had the San Francisco 49ers and the New England Patriots in there. But as the season moves on, I think I'm gonna have to lean your way and say it's gonna be the Manning Bowl in February.
Okay.
Well, that wraps it up for NFL. A lot of good discussion, so please feel free to leave your comments on our video or tweet us, at DBLD Sports Show on Twitter, and we'd love to hear your comments and see what you guys have to think about where the NFL stands, who your top 5 teams are, and who you think is going to be your Super Bowl winner. So we're going to take a little break here, and when we get back, we'll touch in on NCAA football.
This is Double D Sports Show.
All right, we're back here, Double D Sports Show. Eric Cam, Logan DeRung, reminding you to follow us on Twitter. We got a couple new followers this week on like an MLB blog and an NFL blog, so we thank you for following us, and we followed you back. So be sure to check us out on Twitter. We're going to move into college football now. BCS standings as of yesterday morning, or this morning, I guess.
Yep.
Notre Dame jumped up to number 1. Alabama jumped up to number 2 with the losses for Oregon and K-State.
Yep.
We'll touch on that a little bit later.
So Georgia climbed to number 3 and Florida to number 4. That's interesting to see 3 SEC teams right in there. I know we talked about this a lot. We sort of agree and disagree all at once, because we agree the fact that the SEC, the way that they are just absolutely dominate the BCS.
Right.
Colin Cowherd was on the Herd today, and he had a caller call in, and he defended his SEC roots by saying there's 5 of the top 12 teams in the BCS standings from the SEC. Well, Mr. Cowherd, my only reply to that is exactly. The computers, the pollsters, all the voters give the SEC the benefit of the doubt. I really want to know. I'm really curious, and I hope that Nebraska Cornhuskers, I'm crossing my fingers and praying that the Cornhuskers can win the Big Ten championship and go to the BCS bowl game and get put against one of these SEC teams and see how they pan out. Because is a 10-2, or excuse me, now 9-2 Nebraska team with one game on the schedule, Iowa, soon to be 10-2, I would think. All signs would point. Are they any less of a team than LSU, than Texas A&M? Okay, Alabama or Georgia, one of them will be 10-2 after the SEC title game.
Right.
Actually, one of them will probably be 11-2. Florida has a chance to have 2 losses.
Mm-hmm.
Are these teams that much better than Nebraska? Are they that much better than Florida State, who's sitting at 10-1? Florida State's one bad loss against NC State, 17-16 back in October.
Mm-hmm.
One loss, one bad loss from being a national championship contender. If they're undefeated, they're number 2, right behind Notre Dame. So is the SEC this dominant? I just don't think so.
No, I agree, and we talk about it all the time, and I'm sick of seeing SEC teams in the national championship game for the last 3 or 4 years in a row.
7 years in a row, they have won the national championship.
Okay.
Well, guess what?
That's getting a little ridiculous.
Yep.
I mean, and not to take anything away from K-State or Oregon, but we had our chance, us non-SEC guys, we had our chance to knock an SEC team out of the national championship game with Oregon, with K-State. And as I said last week, I'm a little bit of a Notre Dame fan. My heart's with Nebraska. I want to see Nebraska go win the Big Ten championship and go to the Rose Bowl and win the Rose Bowl. But I was rooting a little bit against either K-State or Oregon, depending on how the game went. And when I saw K-State just getting throttled by Baylor, I was really rooting for Oregon to win that game against Stanford, and they couldn't do it. So we had our chance to keep the SEC team out of there,
absolutely.
and we just couldn't do it.
Absolutely, the chance is completely blown by Oregon and K-State. You know what? I expected Kansas State to drop a game. I really did, but I thought they'd lose next week to Texas. I thought that they could handle Baylor at home, especially. Or no, they were on the road with Baylor.
They were on the road with
Baylor. I didn't, especially to lose the way they did. I knew Stanford was good, and this loss to me solidifies how good Stanford really is. They are a good team, and that's a huge win for Notre Dame.
Yep.
Notre Dame really right now, they obviously have to beat USC if they want to play for the title. They don't beat USC, they're not going to play for the title.
No.
Period.
No.
It would, like I said, it would take a lot of cards to fall in their direction. Every team about it in the top 5 right now would have to lose at least one game for Notre Dame not to play there. That being said, Notre Dame's really only signature win is against Stanford, to me. We saw them beat Oklahoma, Michigan. Those teams just kind of fizzled off, but Stanford came on so strong. That's a huge win for the Irish. Now, the Irish, bottom line is it doesn't matter. They play USC. They play, basically, that is their semifinal game for the Super Bowl, is basically what it comes down to.
Well, and USC is going to be hungry for a win.
Yep.
A lot of people felt USC should not have lost to UCLA. Give props to Jim Mora Jr. for coming out and bringing UCLA football program back around and beating USC. It was kind of a tale of two things, if you want to just kind of touch on that game quick. If UCLA loses to USC but finishes the season in a good record, they're moving in the right direction. If USC beats UCLA, it's expected. But you flip the tables like they did on Saturday, UCLA beating USC. Now Lane Kiffin's job is on the line.
Yep.
He's been there 5 years. It's his last year with Matt Barkley and those 2 great wide receivers, and he brought Silas Red in from Penn State, and they lose to UCLA. He's got to win this game against Notre Dame. If he can win this game against Notre Dame, that saves his job. If he loses, you might see some changes at USC.
He actually, not to correct you, but he hasn't been there 5 years. And this is only his 2nd year as head coach. He was with Tennessee 3 years ago, and he was with the Oakland Raiders.
Okay.
But the thing is with Lane Kiffin, to me, I'm not sure if he's that good of a head coach. He was with Pete Carroll as an assistant coach.
Right.
But that maybe it's his role because he never did it in Oakland. He never did it in Tennessee, and he's not doing it at USC. I'm picking the USC Trojans to beat your Irish Saturday, and I'm picking them. And my reason is, you know what? We talk about the defense. Notre Dame is leading the nation in scoring defense in college football, giving up 10.1 points a game.
Yep.
Okay, but they're only 74th in offense because they're scoring 27 points a game. Now, I don't feel they have the quality competition to boast about having the best D in football. We talk about their schedule. Stanford was the really only signature win for them. I think Monte Teo is a beast. I think he'll have a great game. But is it defensively enough to collectively stop USC? Now, Matt Barkley is out. But the guy that filled in for him, we talk about that. Lane Kiffin does have a system. This offense is a system where Marquise Lee as a wide receiver, this Nelson Englor as a wide receiver, Randall Telford. The USC has weapons on offense for this quarterback to step in. The quarterback, Wittick, to step in, and you know what? He threw 3 for 3 with 40 yards, a 17-yard pass. We don't have any stats to see how good this guy's going to be. I just personally feel like I think that USC is going to come out there playing for their coach. They obviously like this guy. I think they're going to come out and they're going to knock off the Irish. I think the Irish finally get the close games catch up with them. If it's close, I like the Trojans, okay? But also you could have something like you said, where there's uncertainty about the coaching. Despite the AD coming out publicly Sunday and saying he's behind the coach, they could have a little coaching controversy, and the players could essentially quit and the Irish blow them out. I think you're either going to see an Irish blowout or you're going to see the Trojans win it close.
I think if it's a close game, I'm still giving the edge to Notre Dame. I think they are just riding on such a high wave right now with this season, and they're playing as a team. They don't have that one set of superstar players like they did when Brady Quinn was there.
They have Monte Teo.
They have Monte Teo, but I'm saying on the offensive side, you had such hype with Brady Quinn and Jeff Samardzija on the offensive side of things when they were there, and there were so much expectations for him. Where this year I felt there were expectations for him, but not as much.
Not this. There is nobody in the right mind, a college football fan, that thinks Notre Dame is number 1 in the BCS standings at 11-0 going into the last week. Nobody. Nobody thought they could be that good. There's no way.
Right.
No possible
I agree.
way. The only one that thought that is Brian Kelly, their coach, and that football team, and that's why they're there. If they don't believe that, they're not there because they're not that dominant.
Right.
Bottom line is they are not that dominant. When they get put up against, if they do win and make a national title game, they're not going to cakewalk through it. They are not a dominant team that we've seen in the past. They're not an Alabama. They're not a Florida Gators. They're not a dominant Matt Leinart-led USC team under Pete Carroll. This is a team that's going to have to work for it. Not saying they can't do it, just don't think they won't.
Well, the biggest thing I think is to give credit to Notre Dame is, they switched quarterbacks halfway through the season to Everett Olson. And when you do that, you really don't see a lot of teams being able to make that transfer and still win games.
Here's the thing. Here's the interesting thing. You want to say switch halfway through the season. These guys switched on and off just about all the way.
Right.
It's just unbelievable. No, you don't see a 2-quarterback system work. Now they're going more, it's more with Golston than anything. And that's, I like that. They kind of got to find a point where you make a decision.
Right.
Where you go in one direction or the other.
Right.
He's leading them there, but
so
we think I'm picking USC to knock off Notre Dame this weekend. He's picking Notre Dame. Excuse me, I'm picking USC.
Yeah, I'm picking Notre Dame.
He's picking Notre Dame. I think we can agree number 2 and 3. Alabama will roll Auburn in the Iron Bowl.
Yep.
I think that Georgia will defeat Georgia Tech at home. Georgia and Alabama will play for the SEC title. Yeah. You are in agreement with that, or do you think Georgia Tech?
No. I think it's Georgia-Alabama in the SEC title game, and I'm actually going to pick, just to touch on it quick, I'm picking Georgia to beat Alabama in the SEC title game. So
I will disagree with you on that. I think Bama wins that game, but we're going to get to that a little bit later. We're just kind of going through the top 5 week to close out the last of the season. How about Florida State? That game is huge because Florida is number 4, and just so happens here's the reason this is huge, people. Okay, Notre Dame loses. They are going to drop it below Bama, Georgia, Florida, and Oregon, assuming all those 14 wins. I think that's pretty safe to say.
Yes.
If Notre Dame loses, they drop to 5.
Yes.
At least 5.
Yes.
Okay. Florida, if Florida wins, they won't have to play in the title game, but they can finish with an 11-1 record. Okay, 11-1 record. And if Notre Dame drops a game, to me, Florida's going to play the winner of Georgia-Bama in the title game. We're going to have an all-SEC final, just similar to last year, only LSU and Alabama is going to be Florida and Bama or Georgia. I really think that's what's going to happen if Notre Dame loses, but that's why I'm asking you. Who do you got, Florida State?
I'm picking Florida State to win that game. I'm going to pick Florida State to knock off that one. And the other one, number 5, Oregon playing Oregon State. I think the recipe that Stanford used against Oregon this last week, Oregon State's, they're gonna use that, and I think Oregon State's gonna give Oregon back-to-back losses to finish the season.
First to start on first to start on the Florida State Seminoles. They're 7th in offense and 5th in defense. Like I said, they're one bad game away from being a national title contender, and I think they could compete with Notre Dame. I really do. We saw some of their close comparative games. They beat Wake Forest 52-0. Notre Dame wins 38-0. It's hard to do this. They beat Boston College 51-7. I believe Notre Dame was like 21-6.
Yep.
That's the score of their game. It's 33-20 against Miami, and we saw Notre Dame absolutely blow out Miami 41-3. So it's hard. They're beating teams. They're similar teams. I think they'd be a good football game, but I think Florida State knocks off the Gators. It's not going to be enough to jump them up with that big loss to NC State, and so Florida State's going to fall out of it. But then here's the thing: I think Oregon will finish and beat the Beavers, win 11-1. They do have an outside chance at the BCS title still, because if Florida loses, if Notre Dame loses, then you got Bama and Georgia in front of them. Well, those two teams are going to play each other, so only one's going to win. And I think Oregon can sneak in. That's what I think is going to happen. And here's why. I think that this week Stanford is going to knock off UCLA. Okay, why is that huge? Why is that important? Well, I'll tell you why. Because if Stanford knocks off UCLA, Stanford wins the Pac-12 North, right?
Yes.
Okay, so Stanford goes to play in the Pac-12 championship game against UCLA. It'll be a rematch. That's a funny thing. They're going to play in 2 consecutive weeks if they can beat them. Okay, if they win. But if UCLA knocks off Stanford, then Oregon has to play in the title game. Now, I don't think they will. I think Stanford's going to win. Oregon not playing in that Pac-12 title game may come back to be a benefit for them. It's an extra game that they don't have to play. Winning that game won't really do anything because they need teams above them to lose. If Notre Dame doesn't lose, Oregon's chances are done.
Yeah.
Okay. If Florida doesn't lose, sorry, Oregon, your chances are done.
Yeah.
It comes down to the national championship is going to be, assuming Alabama and Georgia win this week, the winner of that game in the title will be one of them,
Yep.
and it'll be Notre Dame, Florida, or Oregon if one of them wins. So here's a question I got for you. Okay, let's pretend Notre Dame loses this week. Okay, Florida wins, they're in. We're in agreement.
Okay. Yep.
Do you think? And
Yep.
we got 4.
Yep.
How about Florida loses and Oregon wins? Do you think Oregon slides in? Oregon and Notre Dame both 11-1.
Yeah.
Okay. We thought that Notre Dame would probably drop to 5. That'd put Oregon in.
Yep.
What if they all lose? What if they all lose? This could be just a year of havoc for the BCS.
Right.
It really could. Because
Well, if they all lose, Notre Dame would still have 1 loss. Everybody else would have 2, so Notre Dame would obviously be in it.
But that's what I'm saying. Are you sure with even you think Kansas State? I don't think Kansas State's chances are obliterated. I don't think they're gone. I think if Kansas State comes out and smokes Texas, they can move up, and Notre Dame may fall all the way down to low at 6. I don't think Notre Dame will go below LSU at 9-2 or Stanford or Texas
Right.
A&M because they all have 2 losses. But I think that Kansas State then creeps up into the picture. I think if Notre Dame loses, their chances of the national title are gone.
Yeah.
Because it takes too much to fall. You're talking about Florida having to lose, K-State, Oregon. You're talking about 3 teams having to lose
Yep.
that have very winnable games. I don't think it'll happen. My prediction, picked at the beginning of the year, I picked Oregon to upset Alabama in the national title game. Okay, posters on Twitter, blew it up all over. I thought I had it picked right for the longest time.
Yep.
Okay, turned out Alabama lost, then Oregon lost, and I'm just sitting here thinking, oh no. Well, guess what? I think my pick is still very much alive because I'm picking Florida and Notre Dame to lose. Now, if one of them wins, my pick is out the door wrong. But like I said, Oregon, if UCLA knocked off Stanford, Oregon would go to the Pac-12 title game, get another win. That extra win on the schedule may look over, and they might jump Florida possibly. But it's just, they're not going to jump a perfect Notre Dame team, and they're not going to jump a one-loss SEC team. So if
Right.
Notre Dame wins, we're going to look at, to me, Bama Notre Dame or Georgia Notre Dame in the
Yep.
title.
Yep. And I was just going to touch on
And
that
that'd
a
be
little
good
bit.
for college football. I think that is. You do have 2 very good football teams. Not to say that 3 and 4 can't play with 1 and 2, but it's the system we have right now. So we do have 2 of the best 4 or 5 teams in the championship. That's what we want.
Yeah, and just to touch on the Notre Dame, whether it's Georgia or Alabama, Mark Schlabach has got Georgia beating Alabama, and they're going to be in the national championship game against Notre Dame. And Brad Edwards has got Notre Dame versus Alabama. So,
Okay.
those,
That's the thing. It's just one of them teams is going to have 2 losses, so they probably won't even make a
BCS bowl
BCS
game.
bowl.
Right.
Okay, I'm kind of interested in that. Go over some of them, what they're kind of picking.
Well, Schlabach, I said, Georgia, Notre Dame, Edwards, Notre Dame, Alabama.
Kind of touch on you got the national championship. Touch on the bowl games, the Orange Bowl, the Sugar Bowl, the Rose Bowl. See what they got over there.
Let's see, the AT&T Cotton Bowl, is that a BCS bowl
That's
game?
not a BCS game, but that's
Tostitos Fiesta Bowl, that's a BCS game. Yep. They got Schlabach's got Oklahoma versus Oregon in that game. Brad Edwards has got K-State versus Oregon in that game.
Who would they have going to the Rose?
Rose Bowl, they got Nebraska versus Stanford. Both of them got Nebraska versus Stanford.
And see, that's if Stanford wins against UCLA, which isn't guaranteed. This all week, this conversation next week is going to be completely different.
Right.
It's exciting. It's college football, but I think we're going to agree to disagree. Eric's still picking. He's got a Notre Dame versus Georgia championship. To me, I'm sticking with my Alabama-Oregon championship. If it ends up being Notre Dame, Alabama, Notre Dame, Georgia, we'll break it down then. And I'm sure we're going to disagree because I can only imagine what he's picking for his national championship. And we'll sail that ship when we get there.
All right. Let's move into MLB now. Big stuff happening down in Miami.
Absolutely.
Basically a fire sale is what I've been heard it called on ESPN and ESPN.com with the Miami Marlins trading off Jose Reyes, starting pitcher Josh Johnson, Mark Burley, catcher John Buck, and an infielder, outfielder, and Emilio Bonifacio. And they're cleaning house in Miami is what they're doing. I think that me personally, Miami's not a baseball town. Colin Calvert has touched on this many times on his show, and I agree with him a lot on what he says on this. Miami's just not a baseball town. I don't think baseball can succeed down there, and I think they're trying to get their heads above water with their financial situation because they spent a lot of money on that stadium down there, and the taxpayers spent a lot of money on that stadium down there, and it's a bad time for Miami baseball.
It is a bad time for Miami baseball. That's very obvious. You look at their record last year. You look at the way the players played. It's a bad time for Miami baseball, obviously. But the fact is, the Florida Marlins won 2 world championships in the last 15 years. How many franchises have won 2 world championships in the last 15 years? Not that many. We got one about 5 hours to the east of us that hasn't won one since 1991.
Right.
There's the Chicago White Sox. They haven't won one in a year. Look at some of the most storied, so-called best baseball towns in America. The Chicago Cubs haven't won a World Series in over 100 years.
Right.
I mean, I don't think it's not that Miami baseball can't succeed. It's that they're going through a really tough time, and the low interest in fans and whatnot is going to make it extremely hard. If they have a solid fan base, even when they're losing, because it's not that they can't succeed because they can't win games. Like I said, 2 World Series in the last 15 years.
Well,
what it comes down to is the fan base is just not there. You got the Miami Heat from opening day till the middle of July, and you got the Dolphins kicking off, and the college, and it's not there.
Right.
It's really tough to compete with all them fans, and which really makes it's hard for me to believe. You got all this nice weather, beautiful weather in Miami. Why wouldn't you want to go watch baseball?
Well, they play in a dome. I mean, they play in an enclosed stadium in Miami for baseball.
No. That's Tampa Bay you're thinking of. Miami, the new stadium they built is outdoors, and their old stadium is outdoors.
Okay.
It doesn't make sense to me. I think it is just a lot that they just haven't had success because when they were Florida Marlins, they went through, they won the World Series in 2003.
Yeah, it was either 02 or 03.
02 or 03. Okay, they went about 8 years where they just were not much good. And they changed the uniform, they built a new stadium, they got all the hype, they bring in Ozzie Guillen, all the players, and just go flat.
Yep, and that's what I wanted to touch on. When they won the World Series those 2 years, their formula for building a team was 180 degrees different than what they're doing now. Now they're trying to spend money that they don't have. They're trying to build a nice big fancy stadium. They're trying to bring in the big name players, and it's just not working out for them.
Yep.
So, like we said,
they made this trade. They traded these guys to the Blue Jays.
Right.
I don't know if you mentioned that or not,
yep.
But they traded to the Blue Jays. Blue Jays basically gave them Yunel Escobar and some prospects. Thoughts on the trade? Winners, losers?
Oh, winners by far are Toronto Blue Jays.
Yep.
They might solidify their position in the AL East.
We're going to talk Blue Jays in a little bit, but I think you're exactly right. In Miami, it was a pure salary dump.
Oh yeah.
They basically revamped their roster starting fresh. I saw something on ESPN. I want to say they got rid of 9 guys off the roster.
Yep.
That's huge. 9 main key guys. They get a new manager, Mike Redmond. and the players are simply not working out. They had to do something. They lost too many games. You know, we talk about the thing with Ozzie Guillen, the comments he made about Fidel Castro. I don't think that had anything to do with him being fired.
No.
Ultimately, it came down to they lost games.
Yep.
A lot of money to spend in Toronto, and they pretty much have to do it. They have to do something to try to get back into the AL East. And now, as long as we're there, let's talk Toronto Blue Jays. They signed Melky Cabrera. We read that. What do you think about that sign? And what do you think about the players they bring in? Let's just talk Blue Jays for a little bit.
The Melky Cabrera signing is kind of, you know, went out with that 50-game suspension on the steroids thing. I don't think, or I guess not steroids, but performance-enhancing drugs.
No.
You know, I think that's the reason they signed Melky Cabrera, because of the year he had. But I bring it to, I don't think those are good numbers to go off of.
Right.
Melky needed to have a season like he had in order to get a signing with either the Giants or a different team. But I'm just not sold on Melky because of the performance-enhancing drugs. But if he can come out and he can put up those numbers that he did the first half of the season with the Giants for Toronto,
then it's cheap.
It's a steal for Toronto.
Right,
I mean, they
absolutely.
got him at a cheap price for baseball salaries.
2 years, $16 million. This is a steal for the Toronto Blue Jays.
Absolutely.
If he can produce those numbers. If he can hit in the high 320s, 330s, he can drive in 20 to 30 home runs in the year and 80 to 90 RBIs,
Yep.
and bat sixth in the lineup
Yeah.
and play outfield. It is a
Yep.
huge steal for them at $8 million a year.
Well, and especially when you got guys like Jose Reyes who can get on base and get in scoring position off a single.
Right,
I mean,
right. And then you look at, you know, we've got guys, but if he plays as he did in New York in his first year in Kansas City and doesn't have those big numbers, then it is kind of overpaying. So it's a double-edged sword, and it'll be interesting.
well, I don't know if it's overpaying if he doesn't produce. Like, I mean, I think it's a good deal either way. If he does produce, you got him cheap.
It's a low risk. It's a low risk.
Yeah.
Is really what it comes down to.
Yep.
What's your expectations? I mean, you know, we talk maybe not expectations, but the status of Toronto. You know, I think American League East may become the hardest division to predict, because I personally still think the division is going to go through New York just because they've won it like 15 out of the last 17 years. Okay, but the Orioles, to me, they have a lot to prove, because they had a great season, terrific season for Baltimore, but they can come out and win 40 games next year. They just are that separate team. Their players got really hot and played well all year, won a lot of close games. I don't know if they can do that again. Maybe they can. They got to prove it to us, the consistency. The Rays and the Red Sox took steps backwards. Boston took leaps backwards.
Leaps, yeah.
But they are the Red Sox, and they will rebuild faster than slower and be back. Talk about Toronto. The lineup's better. It's not the best in the division, but it is better. It is significantly improved, and I feel like the rotation, they might have the best rotation in the division. Because, I'd take CC Sabathia or David Price over any pitcher on the Jays staff, but I'd take the combination of Josh Johnson, Mark Burley, and Brandon Morrow over CC, Hiroki Kuroda, Phil Hughes in New York, and David Price, James Shield, and Matt Moore in Tampa. I take the overall collective rotation. I take Toronto's. They have the best rotation in that league, or in that division. So if the lineup of Reyes, Cabrera, Bautista, Edward Encarnacion, they got Brett Lowry, Adam Lind coming back. JPN and CBO is a big player as a young guy. Colby Rasmus, another young guy, and they signed Meister as Turris. You know, these guys, they're good baseball players if they can gel together.
Right.
Toronto has a chance to be last year's Baltimore.
I think so too. I think, you know, they're in the AL East with New York and Baltimore. They're in that division, correct? Am I saying that right?
Yep.
Okay. So, you know, I think New York's going to have, you know, they're going to, obviously, I think they're going to win the AL East. I think Baltimore's going to come in second. I think Toronto's going to come in third. But I think they can be that second wild card team where they're playing.
So you think both the wild cards come out of the AL East this year?
I think they do.
Okay. You know, that's last year we saw the wild card come out of the American League East with the Baltimore Orioles, and the other one was, they were the fifth team. They were the second wild card.
Right.
The other one was the Texas Rangers, because the Oakland A's won that division.
Right.
So you know what, they could possibly do that. I'm curious to see where Boston finishes. I don't see Boston having another year like that. I hope they do, but I don't see them having another year like that. It's going to be interesting. You know, baseball is a same thing. The injuries and the trades and the free agency. You know, we're just hitting the start of free agency. There's
Right.
a lot of big names out there.
Yep.
If Josh Hamilton goes to Baltimore, Baltimore definitely solidifies itself over Toronto and probably pushes the Yankees even further. But it's all just left to be said, and we can't really even talk about it until it happens.
Right, and when the season starts, there's 162 games to play out.
Right.
So.
Even when the year starts, it's hard to make a decision. But
Yep.
Awards were announced this last week. We got MVP and Cy Young awards, two of the biggest ones. For those of you that don't know, most valuable player is the most valuable player award given out in each league, the American League and the National League, and the Cy Young award is given to the top pitcher in each league. First of all, what's your thought? You think pitchers should be able to win MVP races? We talk about it because last year Justin Verlander was voted as the MVP as well as the Cy Young. Now, is it fair? Because pitchers the Cy Young, isn't that basically the MVP of pitching?
Yeah, you exactly right. I think that's a very good point you make, where the Cy Young is your MVP pitcher
Right.
throughout the AL or the NL. But I think in a situation with Justin Verlander, you talk about an MVP as a most valuable player, not necessarily the best player, but the most valuable
Yep.
player. And I think pitchers can if they have a year like Verlander did, then yes, put them in the MVP talk, and maybe like Verlander did
Right.
get it.
Right.
But this year with Melky Cabrera, or not Melky, but Miguel Cabrera winning the AL MVP, Triple Crown, it's pretty hard not to say he was going to be
we
the
talk
MVP.
about MVPs. I mean, we talk about like Rookie of the Year. Mike Trout won the AL and Bryce Harper won the NL. That was pretty well, easily.
Right, and
easy
then there was a
decision.
lot of argument for Mike Trout to get AL MVP too.
Yep. Right, absolutely. He was right there. I think just in the end, Mike Trout just didn't have the games. His averages were less per game than Cabrera, so I agree on the pick for Miguel Cabrera. But Mike Trout, had he played the full season, he might have been the Triple Crown winner.
Right.
We don't know. So
Right.
I'm interested to see next year. And then in the National League, on the other side, Buster Posey actually won the MVP, and I have to agree on that pick too. You know what? He took his team to another World Series championship, and
Right.
that has a big, huge payoff in it. But I think they got the MVPs right. You know what? I got a little discrepancy on the Cy Young, but you
Yeah.
go ahead and touch up on the MVP and give your.
Well, the thing with Mike Trout is, I think the reason he was so close is because of his ability to steal bases. He had way more stolen bases than Miguel
And
Cabrera
defense.
did, and
Defense
defense.
was a big
Yeah,
thing.
he was by far a Gold Glover this year in the outfield.
Didn't actually win the Gold Glove.
He did.
Interesting enough.
That
No.
is interesting
The-
enough,
the
because I
Gold-
thought for sure he would
The
have.
Gold Glove. You know what? I'm trying to even remember who got it. I don't have it in front
Well,
of me
it
right
doesn't
now.
matter. But the thing I think that really solidified Miguel Cabrera was, in the last 31 games, he had 30 RBIs. And he basically, when his team needed to win to get into the playoffs, to win that AL Central Division, he stepped up and produced for his team.
He
I
did.
think that pushed him
Yep.
over the top on
Yep,
winning
you're
that.
absolutely right. Yeah, you know what? We talk about the Cy Young. I definitely didn't agree with the one, just because. I mean, it is the Cy Young. It's a good. Adam Jones actually just came to me. Sorry.
Okay.
Kind of a ADD moment there. Adam Jones won the center field Gold Glove
Okay.
for this year, but
Wow,
but
yeah.
the AL Cy Young. I'm gonna start in American League. I thought it was unfair for Verlander to lose, because I think he lost simply because of his poor performance in Game 1 of the World Series.
Yep.
He gave up 3 home runs, 2 to the Kung Fu Panda, and he willed his team to the World Series with huge wins. But he just had that bad World Series start. He lost 3 more games and won 3 more games than David Price. But he led in two huge stats to me: ERA and strikeouts,
Yep.
and also complete games.
Well,
And-
Verlander's ERA was 2.64, and Price's was 2.56. So Price actually did have a better ERA.
Was that what it was?
Yeah.
2.56 and 2.64. Okay, read them backwards. Either way, we look at complete games. Justin Verlander, 6 complete games. David Price is
Well,
2.
and how many one-hitters did he have? I mean, he was
Yep.
on the verge of throwing a lot of no-hitters this
Yep.
last year.
And
So.
then we look at innings. Justin Verlander was up there for 25, almost 30 more innings than David Price. The starts, 33 to 31. Verlander had 2 more starts. The team's win percentage was relatively basically the same. He walked about the same. The walk to hit the whip, which is walk to hit, sprinting pitch, was just about the same. It's very close. I just feel like had Verlander won Game 1 of the World Series, regardless of how the Tigers finished, had he won his start and maybe won his second start, he wins this.
Right.
David Price pitched on a team that just wasn't relevant. They were not relevant. He won 20 games, but look in the National League. Obviously, the most wins doesn't always win you the Cy Young. I felt like Verlander should have won it just because of the fact that his team was relevant. They won the American League. Tampa Bay didn't even make the playoffs.
Well, right, and it's a very close race between Justin Verlander and David Price.
It's
and
very
both-
close. Very close. You're exactly right.
And I think the
want to
thing that-
stop you for a minute. I'm not trying to take anything away from David Price. He had a great year.
Right.
But I think that a tie break, when they're that close, you go with the player on the team taking his team the farthest. And you can't blame Justin Verlander for Detroit losing the World Series. They lost 3 games after
Right.
he lost his team.
Right.
So to me,
I
I
think-
think it should have been Verlander.
Looking at it now, I'm in favor of Verlander winning the Cy Young. I thought he should have been deserving of the Cy Young, but Tampa Bay, they really weren't. I mean, they weren't irrelevant, but you look at the division they're in. I mean, the Yankees won 95 games, Baltimore won 93 games. Tampa Bay still went 90 and 72,
Yeah.
where Detroit only went 88 and 74. Now, only that's a 2-game split,
Yeah.
but Tampa Bay is playing 2 teams ahead of them that had outstanding seasons.
Yeah, you definitely have a good point there at the wins, but the bottom line is how good are
Right.
the Rays? Because maybe the reason that the Yankees and the Orioles have
95 and
95
93.
and 93 wins is because they play 20 games a year against Tampa Bay, against Toronto,
Right.
against Boston.
Right.
Because it really showed in the playoffs that Detroit was obviously the best team.
Right.
It showed
Yep.
that they went through New York. It
Right.
showed that they
Right.
were better than the AL East. So
Right. And
I
that's-
think that's
that's
kinda
the
where it
determining
comes back
factor.
to my point that Justin Verlander lost the ERA and the World Series start all in one thing altogether.
Yeah. Yep. And then, like you said, Justin Verlander led his team to the playoffs where David Price couldn't get over that hump and take him to the playoffs. NL MVP, R.A. Dickey, he had a great year. He had some good outings, 20 and 6 win-loss record, 230 strikeouts, 2.73 ERA. But my vote in the NL, I think probably should have went to Clayton Kershaw in the Dodgers. 2.53 ERA, 14-9 win-loss record, 229 strikeouts. So the things are there the same. The one stat I want to kind of point out on why I think R.A. Dickey did get the NL Cy Young is his winning percentage, 20 and 6 win-loss record with a 76% winning percentage, where Clayton Kershaw went 14-9 with a 56% winning percentage.
Yeah,
I think that was the biggest
they-
determining factor on why R.A. Dickey got that.
You're exactly right. With the New York Mets, they were 74 and 88. Okay, they had a 457 winning percentage as a team. So for them to win 3/4 of the time he took the ball,
Right.
that was definitely a lot. I
Right.
mean, he won 20 of their 70 wins. That's unbelievable.
Right.
Or, excuse me, 20 of their 75 wins. That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Look at the Dodgers, 86 and 76, 10 games above 500, but failed to make the playoffs. Had the Dodgers been better, I think then we're looking at Clayton Kershaw as the National League MVP. I like to point out that I think Gio Gonzalez has to be in this race too. He obviously got a lot of votes.
Yes.
He finished 3 points behind Clayton Kershaw, but we basically saw we forgot to mention 153 points to 149. David Price over Justin Verlander.
Right.
In the National League, R.A. Dickey 209 to 96
Oh, wow.
to 93 for Gio. So I mean, these guys. This was a landslide victory for R.A. Dickey,
Yeah.
and I'm not sure it should have been that big of a deal, big of a difference, because I think Kershaw would have won if his team was better. He led in key stats, such as the ERA. He led in the ERA. He led in the strikeouts category, or he was right with Dickey.
Yeah,
in
I mean,
strikeout
one
category.
strikeout difference.
Yep. And
Dickey had 230 and Kershaw had 229.
229 and complete. And the other thing that he won with was the whip. But only 14 wins and 9 losses, not a lot of run support, so it's not really his fault, but ultimately that's what it comes down to. When you're looking
Right.
at team players that won 20, I'm surprised he beat Gonzalez. I'm surprised he finished in front of him.
Yeah.
Because Gonzalez had 21 wins. When you're looking at 21 to 14 or 20 to 14, that makes wins a difference. When you're looking at 20 to 18 or 21 to 19, 2-3 run or win difference, that's not so bad. But 7 wins to me is why. And for Gio, I talk about this guy. I think if the Nats made the World Series and maybe even won it, or at least made it, that makes enough of a run to put him in position, especially if he pitches well. Because R.A. Dickey and Clayton Kershaw were sent home in the postseason, but Gio only got 1 start because they ended up losing to St. Louis. So I look at it. Dickey was better in ERAs, Ks, 5 complete games and 3 shutouts. Gio 121, Dickey 120. So I think if they were relevant and made the World Series, and he pitched well, he wins it, just like Verlander did.
Yeah.
And the fact that neither one of them did, that's why the other guy won it. I don't agree with it, but that's ultimately why it happened that way.
Yep. Yeah, that's a very good point. I think it's going to be exciting to see how these guys come out next year and pitch.
One interesting thing we didn't actually plan to talk about, but I just like to see what you thought. Manager of the year. I really wish that the AL Manager of the Year would have went to Buck Showalter, just because of the history of this guy. The way he does this with teams when he comes to them. You know, in his second year, he got second place with finishing behind Bob Melvin in Oakland by 8 points. You know, there's a lot of pitchers or managers that could always win this. You know, we see Joe Girardi get votes. Okay, Joe Girardi gets votes because it's the Yankees and they're the biggest fan base in America.
Right.
Okay, Joe Girardi had no business. Jim Leland, I can see him getting some votes for taking the World Series. If he would have won it, maybe. But Manager of the Year, you usually think about someone who does a lot that with something that we didn't think he had.
Well, turns around a team. I mean,
either turning around a team or just taking a bunch of guys that we didn't expect to do that well and do something with them. You know, so I think they picked it right with Melvin and Showalter. I was hoping Showalter would win it, but I think they picked it right that they did get one of those two. And in the National League, I think to me, Davey Johnson won it for what he did with Washington. Washington is not Washington anymore. Okay, they're stacked with talent. I'm not sure Davey Johnson should have won this. I think Bruce Bochy should have won this because he just won his second World Series in 2 years, or in 3 years, with a bunch of guys that no one knows. No one even knows about them. Dusty Baker got some votes. The way they collapsed against the Giants. I mean, Bochy knocked Baker out of the playoffs.
Right.
How did Dusty Baker beat Bruce Bochy by 17 votes? It's all politics. You know it. I know it.
Yeah.
The awards are all politics. Dusty Baker is a more higher profile name than Bruce Bochy, but Bruce, you win one more World Series, you're going to be talked about as one of the greatest ever. You have to. The 3 championships, it has to put him in that conversation. But just like to touch on that for our viewers, this is something I'd really like to hear about. So be sure and tweet us back.
Absolutely.
BBLD Sports Show. Let's hear about this Manager of the Year. You know, it's kind of a pointless award because ultimately, what does it do? It doesn't really give you anything.
It fills up your trophy case.
Fills up your trophy case basically, but it's just kind of fun for the argument, for the talk. So try and tweet us back on that.
Yep. Well, let's finish up tonight with a little NCAA basketball. Got into kind of some good matchups last week with Duke taking on Kentucky and Michigan State taking on Kansas. I think both of us have those guys going pretty far in our tournament this year, prediction-wise.
Yep.
I think you had Kansas going to the national championship game, and Kentucky, I think, being at least an Elite 8 team, but I don't think they're a Final Four team. But let's just talk about those 2 games real quick, before we send you on your way this evening. Duke upsetting Kentucky last week. I think a big win for Duke. I wasn't really surprised just because of the fact the way John Calipari recruits. You know, he lost a lot of guys last year to the one and done, and he had to bring a whole new group of guys in. And it just shows that Coach K, what he's doing in Duke, keeping guys there and building a system there, can take on a Kentucky team who tries to bring in the big-time recruits and gets a good preseason ranking at number 3, and they took them down.
I actually want to just go back and say my prediction was Kansas over Louisville.
Right.
Actually, I had Kentucky and Indiana as my other 2 Final Fours.
Oh, okay.
Standing by that, obviously a week difference. It's not really that big of a change.
No. But the biggest thing is just Duke beating Kentucky.
We're starting to Duke Kentucky. The Dukies win this game 75-68. It was a game they had a 2-point lead at halftime and they expanded it by 5 in the final couple minutes. Good game, good basketball game. We saw Mason Plumlee. To me, this kid's making a name for himself. He's got potential now to go into the NBA. Didn't know if he was ever going to come out of his own and come into his own, I should say. And he has 18 points, 7 of 8 from the field, and 4 of 4 from the free throw line. To me, they got to get ways to give him more shots.
Yes.
When he's making baskets like that, they're high percentage shots close to the rim, dunks, layups, easy little short turnaround jumpers. They have to get him more shots. They need Seth Curry, who was 7 of 14 shooting for 23 points, to have a huge year to have success. Just don't know if they have enough. Don't know if this is going to be enough. It's a big win. You can remember Kentucky's young and experienced, and they don't have the chemistry like every year. It's just that they're not quite as good. They're just a tad probably overrated because there's a lot of hype to live up to with Calipari's previous teams. I think Nerlens Noel is going to keep this team relevant, but I think he's obviously another one and done. But I think this whole roster is another one and done.
Right.
I think they're talented enough not to win a championship, but they're talented enough because the chemistry won't be there. But they're talented enough to make a Final Four, and I think they will. Duke, I don't give them a shot at the Final Four. They're a regional final team at best. Elite Eight, possibly a Sweet 16, maybe. I don't think that they win this, but it was a good game. We talked about, John Calipari versus Coach K, and then you got Tom Izzo versus Bill Self. Four are probably the top 5 coaches, maybe go 10. Well, with a couple of them, but you throw in Roy Williams as the other 5th guy. In college basketball today, I know we got Rick Pitino I left out of there and stuff like that. But we got 4 very highly respected coaches in college basketball in this classic. And yeah, you're right. Duke just flat out won the game. Is it going to make or break anyone's season? No.
No, I don't think so.
Because Duke's going to lose some games. Kentucky's going to lose a couple more. Come tournament time, they could play again, and Kentucky could reverse the roles.
Right.
Similar to the Kansas-Michigan State game. But it's just fun to talk about. So what did you think about the Kansas, number 21 Michigan State upsetting number 7 Kansas?
I just think it was, Michigan State always gets pumped up to play in this annual championship class.
Did you get to watch the
game?
game?
I didn't get to watch the game, but just from watching them in the past, they've played North Carolina in this thing a couple times, and they always play North Carolina tough no matter what their rank is. They always play the team they play tough in this annual championship. Tom Izzo's always got his team where he wants it for every game, beginning of the season to the end of the season, whereas Kansas might be fitting in a few pieces here and there. Like you said at the end, it's early in the season. I don't think these upsets really mean a whole lot, but they're quality wins for Duke and Michigan State. It's gonna look good on their resume come the end of the year if they need a win to get it. If they're a bubble team, you never know what could happen. Not saying Duke's gonna be a bubble team, but Michigan State could very easily be a bubble team, no matter which way their season goes. But a win against Kansas probably helps them in their favor.
This is actually this is called the Champions Classic. This is the 2nd annual. What you're referring to is a different thing. It's a similar thing. It's basically 2 highly profile, highly rated, highly respected programs playing each other early in the year to get buzz for the season. But this is Michigan State, Kansas, Kentucky, and Duke. They're basically playing a round robin over 3 years, where Kansas played Kentucky last year, lost. Played Michigan State this year, lost. Kentucky beat Kansas, Duke beat Michigan State. Now Duke is now sent 2-0, and they'll play Kansas next year, and Michigan State and Kentucky will play. That's how this rotates.
Oh, okay.
But the point is, Kansas lost this game last year, ended up playing a national title game.
Right.
Okay, they lost a similar way. Against Kentucky last year, Kansas led with 5 minutes, by 5 points with 5 minutes up, and they flat out blew it. Just as Bill Self said, Michigan State came out and played better in the final 5 minutes. Michigan State looked a lot better after the loss to UConn. The loss to UConn wasn't good, but, expect Sparty to be there in the end because this game was in Germany. All right, they had a lot of stuff. Who knows that maybe they had to stay up late traveling or didn't get the right meal or all these things playing overseas. Tom Izzo's flat out a wizard. Keith Appling played well. He got 19 points. I'm not worried about my KU pick because, like I said, they lost to Coach Calipari and Wildcats last year. Turned out to be okay. Turned out to be a rematch, ironically, of that game in the national title game. Not saying that no prediction there with Michigan State and Kansas rematching for a title, but I think you got senior leaders with Elijah Johnson, Jeff Whitby, and Ben McLemore is averaging 16 points a game. He's a future standout guard. I think you're going to see Kansas continue to improve as they do every year, and same with those other teams in that conference or in that classic. Michigan State, Duke, Kentucky, Kansas, talk about North Carolina. These are teams that are always there. They always have a chance to make a run towards a national championship because of coaching, because of program, because of respect, because of all the things down the line. They just always are there, and it's not going to change.
No, yep, you're right there. A lot of season left in college basketball. Obviously, we're just kind of getting into the thick of things, or the beginning of things with some exhibition games, and when we get into conference play, and
it's really going to heat up.
It is going to heat up, and we'll get to talking about that more. We spent a lot of time on the NFL today. That's really in the thick of things. What the sports world is doing right now. That's where my focus is on sports. I watch a lot. NFL is where it's at. We'll get to some NBA as things get heated up there in a little bit.
Quick thing. I know you didn't mention this, and not for any discussion, because quite frankly, Double D sports viewing audience, I flat out don't care. But I know you're a NASCAR fan, so maybe you want to give a little update on that.
Oh yeah, Brad Keselowski winning the Sprint Cup championship yesterday, beating out Jimmy Johnson for Brad Keselowski's first championship in the Sprint Cup Series. Only his third full season in the Sprint Cup Series. I think the only other one to do that was Jimmy Johnson, won his first championship in his third full season. And kind of gotten away from NASCAR the last couple of years. Still love to watch it. I've always been a NASCAR fan, grew up a NASCAR fan, and Jimmy Johnson's just kind of been the dominant guy in NASCAR for the last few years.
That's one thing I know. I wanted to let you say it because you have knowledge. Probably, I'm just not into it. Just don't know how all the points work and all that. But the thing is, Jimmy Johnson, for Brad Keselowski to win, that's unbelievable, because Jimmy Johnson, all along I'm seeing Jimmy Johnson's name when they show it on Monday on Sports Center, or on, throughout the week, and I'm thinking, oh man, Jimmy Johnson's going to win again. Well, the last 2 years he hasn't.
Right.
So, to me, for last year I believe Tony Stewart won.
Tony Stewart won it.
And this year Brad Keselowski wins it. That's to me it's probably good for the sport, because it broadens the fan base. It gives people reasons to become a Brad Keselowski fan, to go be a Tony Stewart fan. To change that up a little bit, and also, that's similar to women's college basketball. You can look at it on the other side, because maybe it's better Jimmy Johnson keeps winning. We see Baylor's win streak was taken down by Stanford, or was it Stanford? I believe it was Stanford that beat. See, that's the thing, we don't know about women's basketball, and it's not fair. But when you got a Baylor win streak, at least like UConn had that win streak, that's good for the sport. So I think it kind of goes both ways. But it was obviously Brad Keselowski must be a good driver if he was able to beat Jimmy Johnson, because I know he's good. He won like 7 in a row at one point, or 6 or something.
He won 5 in a row.
Is that
he
what
won 5 straight championships in a row, and he was looking to get his 6th this year. And
last year he lost.
Last 2 years he was looking to get his 6th championship, and last year the race was between Tony Stewart and Carl Edwards. Jimmy Johnson wasn't really a factor last year, but Jimmy Johnson bounced back from this year and kind of worked his way up at the beginning of the chase. The chase, they race 36 races in a year. The 26 are kind of your regular season, and the last 10 are kind of your playoffs. So, he was in that chase this year. He kind of worked his way up from the bottom. I don't think he was in the 12th position in the final 10 races, but he was down in the 6 or 7 or 8 range. Yeah, Jimmy was.
Okay.
And he kind of worked his way up, but with consistent finishes. But yeah, Brad Keselowski.
The headline was Keselowski defeats Johnson. Basically, those are the two that
those were the two that it came down to. And we won't talk a lot of NASCAR on here. Just touch on things like Keselowski winning his first national championship. Or not national championship, but Sprint Cup championship. And it's good for Keselowski. I think he's an upcoming star in NASCAR, and I'm really looking forward. I love watching him race. He kind of reminds me of a Dale Earnhardt type figure, where he's going to race you hard no matter what. And it's fun to watch guys like that and get in there and mix it up.
Yeah, 2006 to 2010, Jimmy Johnson won
the points championship.
The points championship. So that just shows his dominance. So
maybe
it is good for the sport as the fan base. And the other thing, when you got one guy dominating, it really catches the eye of the people that don't follow it, like myself, to go, oh, I want to watch, see if this guy wins it again. 6 in a row, 7 in a row, 8 in a row. That's unbelievable.
Right.
So I think it kind of goes both ways. But like you said, just wanted to point out that Keselowski won, and it's been now 2 years since Johnson won it, and they'll be kicking it back in the weekend after Super Bowl Sunday.
Yeah, well, I think it's 2 weeks.
Daytona?
I think it's 2 weeks after Super Bowl Sunday. They start up in Daytona, but the Daytona's a whole week-long thing. So basically a week after Super Bowl.
Okay.
Yeah. So they'll get back into it
They
in
don't
a couple
get much
months.
of a break. That is one thing I'd like to point out. Give a salute to all the NASCAR guys out there, you drivers. That's a demanding sport, because you know what? It may not be the physical thing like football or like basketball, but it flat out is a long season. When you talk about going from February to November
Yep.
every year, heck, that's 10 months out of the year that
Yep.
you're on the road, because it's not like football where you fly out on Friday to play Sunday and you're home Monday.
Right.
Those guys get done with the race and they head to the next one.
Yep.
Might get to stop home and say hi for a little bit, but they're on the road. And so I give a shout out to them. That's a demanding job.
It is a very demanding job. But we thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed the show. Please leave your comments. Tweet us at DBLD Sports Show on Twitter, and we'll look forward to coming back with you next week with some more stuff. So have a good week, and we'll see you next week.
This has been Double D Sports Show.